inspiration, and friendliness. Once again, I welcome you to our premises, and I look forward to a memorable and successful strategy to fight terrorism in the Middle East and Africa. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you, Dr. Edu Owusu-Sarkodie, who is the Executive Director here at the Center for Policy Scrutiny. Now, I would like to introduce our guest of honor for today, who will be giving us the opening remarks in the person of Honorable Kojo Oppong Nkrumah, who is the MP for Fuasia Yorubi and a ranking member of the Economic Committee in Parliament.
The ambassador from Israel, Dr. Vladimir Nchidanso, Dr. Owusu-Sarkodie, and the staff of CPS. My colleague, Member of Parliament, who is also my colleague from one of the rural constituencies, the Honorable Akosiakwa, Reverend Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. As you would recall, Ghana has had opportunity to lead conversations on the subject of terrorism in the sub-region for a while now. It is because it is a subject that, though it doesn't stare us in the face, it remains an important matter because it has significant impact on our lives and on the economy of Ghana. For those who recall, in 2019, the then President Akufo-Addo, reminded us that, and here's a quote, "Despite being a beacon of peace, stability, and democracy in our region, which is plagued by terrorism and extremism, Ghana must know that she cannot be immune to terrorist attacks." Today, as we gather under the auspices of the Center for Policy Scrutiny, we are reminded that this caution remains as urgent as ever. Ghana has not yet suffered a major terrorist incident, and we pray we never do. But extremist groups continue to operate in the Sahel and along our northern borders. The southward spread of extremism makes the threat immediate, real, and one that demands vigilance and foresight. The catalysts of terrorism in West Africa lie in socio-economic injustice, political instability, and weak governance. Poverty, unemployment, and fragile state institutions have also created fertile ground for extremist recruitment. Ghana's resilience to extreme terrorism has been the result of deliberate strategies anchored in our national framework for preventing and countering violent extremism and terrorism, and key institutions such as the National Security Council, the Ghana Armed Forces, the Ghana Police Service, and the National Intelligence Bureau. Through interagency collaboration, community engagement, and advanced border management systems, these institutions have sought to strengthen intelligence, deter radicalism, and secure our borders. However, these are not void of challenges. Our analysts are warning that Ghana risks becoming a conduit for extremism and its related networks operating across West Africa. The circulation of over 2 million small arms pieces in Ghana, our porous land borders, migration pressures, and corruption all create vulnerabilities that extremist groups may exploit. Interpol operations have revealed that Ghanaian nationals trafficked in cross-border criminal schemes linked to terrorism, while our northern borders with Burkina Faso have already exposed communities to recruitment by jihadist groups. And that is why today's dialogue, Excellency, is so critical. The fight against terrorism cannot be left to security agencies alone. It requires a whole-of-society approach. Governments, civil society, organizations, communities, international partners, the media, and citizens working hand in hand. CSOs and other institutions like the CPS play a vital role in raising awareness and strengthening early warning mechanisms. Our gathering here today is therefore not merely for a discussion. It is a call to action, to deepen collaboration, to explore how we can share knowledge, build resilience, and ensure that peace and stability in Ghana and across Africa are not taken for granted. I am grateful for the opportunity to be part of you this morning, and we look forward to the lessons that we will all take home. I thank you.
Thank you. you. Thank you, Honorable Kojo Opon Nkrumah. I would like to introduce our first speaker. His Excellency, Mr. Roy Gilad, is the Ambassador of the States of Israel to Ghana, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our first speaker, His Excellency Roy Gilad.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. You make me feel important. I'm only sorry that my mother is not here to listen. Honorable Kojo Opon Nkrumah, I didn't tell you, but I'm also Kojo, born on Monday. Dr. Vladimir Antwe-Danso, thank you very much for coming over. This gentleman is a very busy gentleman. We invited him a few times ago to attend a conference in Israel. Though we approached him 3 months before the conference, he said, I'm too busy. So next year we'll do it 6 months and hope you will not be too busy. Though dealing with terror, I understand how busy you are, Dr. Adu, my friend, members of parliament, my colleague from the diplomatic corps, the ambassador of the Holy See. Good morning, everybody. Today is the 2nd of December, and we are only 3 days after the 29th of November, which was the day in which the United Nations, way back in 1947, decided or voted for what is known as the partition plan to divide the land of Israel, or if you wish, the land of Palestine, between two states, a Jewish state and an Arab state. The Jews have welcomed the resolution, and since then we do have a state. Unfortunately, the other side refused, leaning on different reasons, mainly because of leadership that I believe was quite extreme and radical, and was not willing at the time to divide the land between the two people. And since then, all hell broke loose, and what we see now, it's not that the conflict started on the 29th of November 47, the conflict started around the 1920s of the last century, that is to say 105 years ago. But 29th of November 47 was another opportunity to establish peace between the people. Unfortunately, again, Jews have welcomed it, the other side did not, and since then we are fighting. I will speak today about the terror, addressing the terror in the Middle East, and my colleague later on will speak about addressing terror in Africa. I will divide my presentation into 3. The first part, and I think I was given about 30 minutes, I hope I will not need to use all of them, so we can establish a conversation, which I believe is always more important. I will divide my presentation into 3. The first one will be kind of a background with many maps to bring us more or less to the same place, and then a few lessons that we learned through the last 2 confrontations, or few confrontations we had in Israel in the last 2 years, and then we'll summarize it and we'll try to reach some conclusions. I usually start with this map to tell people that at the end of the day, you hear much about Israel, but Israel is a very small place. Ghana is more than 10 times bigger than Israel. You know, whenever I go and visit the Volta River, I say, wow, that's a river, because people think the Jordan River is something big. So for you to know that you can cross from both sides of the Jordan River, mainly in the summer, by putting 2 stones in the middle and not getting your feet wet. So the difference between Volta and the River and the Jordan River is a bit like the difference between Ghana and Israel. If you can bring back the first slide for a second. So Israel, you can multiply it by 12 times and put it in the map of Ghana, and still place will be left. The strategic meaning of this size is that we lack what we call the strategic depth. We'll speak about strategic depth later on. The popular meaning of lacking a strategic depth means that if you make a mistake, this might be your last mistake. And we'll come to it in a few minutes. Let's move to the next map. This is the state of Israel, surrounded by Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon, with two enclaves within Israel. One of them is the West Bank, that used to belong to Jordan until 67, and the second one is Gaza, which will be the center of our conversation today. I'm going to speak a little bit also about Hezbollah, which is based here in South Lebanon, and we'll come to speak about it in a few minutes. Again, the lessons that I will draw today to you are leaning on our experience in fighting mainly against Gaza and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza, fighting against Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon, and also a little bit addressing the challenge of the Houthis down here in Yemen. Let's move to the next slide. This is next slide if we can. Okay, so this is already zooming in on Gaza. As you can see, it is here in the south of Israel. You hear much about this area. This is the 1950 armistice line. This is a very small area. From north of Gaza till the south of Gaza, it's about 60 kilometers. From west to east, it's about 4 kilometers. Altogether, you have 240 square kilometers, which are the most congested area in the world. It's around 2 million people that live on those 240 square kilometers and make it the most congested area in the world. Let's switch to the next slide. This is already, thank you. This is already showing you what we'll speak a little bit about more later, the first and the second phase of what is known as the Trump peace plan. We have pulled back to this line. You see it is called the yellow, oh, thank you, that's very helpful, Stephanie. This is known as the yellow line. We have, as part of phase one, we've pulled back to the yellow line. We left the city of Gaza, city of Dir Balach, city of Khan Yunis. The city of Rafah is still under Israeli authority. In return for actually a ceasefire, during the first phase, nearly all, short of two of our hijacked people were released, including all the bodies. All the living people were released, like 20, and the bodies were returned, all of them short of two. One of them is an Israeli, one of them is a citizen of Thailand that was hijacked. And in return, Israel released plenty of prisoners, convicted prisoners, that has to be said, not hijacked, by convicted prisoners that have been in Israeli jail after they had much of blood on their hands, but we agreed. So the swap of prisoners against hijacked people was done successfully, again, short of two people. This is where the Israeli army is deployed nowadays. And now we are approaching the more challenging part, which is phase two, that the center of phase two is for the Hamas, and there is another terror organization here known as PIJ, stands for Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They need to decommission themselves. They need to de-arm themselves. In return, the Israeli army will pull back to the international border, not exactly, but to a perimeter that is in some places 1 kilometer, in some places 1.5 kilometers along the national border, in which we are going to deploy our army, and to make sure that the huge fiasco we had on the 7th of October 23 will not repeat. But again, Israel redeployment to the international border will happen only against Hamas and PIJ disarming themselves. And in return, an international body known as BOP, Board of Peace, led by President Trump and former Prime Minister of England, Tony Blair, will control the area, assisted by a technocrat team of Palestinians which are not identified politically. And the most important thing, ISF, International Stabilizing Force, that will be helping to disarm the Hamas. Currently, this ISF, International Stabilization Force, is a matter of debate because unlike, for instance, UNIFIL and your regiment in south of Lebanon, we'll come to speak about it in a minute, which is a peacekeeping force, this one will need to be a peace enforcing force. And currently, there are a lot of hesitations. Many states are saying, okay, we'll be happy to be peacekeeping force, but if we have to enforce the peace on the Hamas, well, we need to think twice about it. Let's move to the second map. Okay, this one is already more familiar to you. This is South Lebanon. Again, this is the border between Israel and Lebanon. This is the Litani River. It's a significant river as big as the Volta River, not as small as the Jordan River, where Hezbollah was pushed to the north of the Litani River after many years that they were deployed along the borders. I guess some of you might have heard about the Beepers operation. If not, that's not the time to speak about it. And using military force, Israel pushed them north of the Litani River, and this is where UNIFIL deploys as a buffer between Israel and Hezbollah. Lebanese army is not to be seen. Unfortunately, they're very weak. Among I think the 9 regiments of UNIFIL, it is by no coincidence that the Ghanaian regiment is next to the border, together with the Irish one, because we have some issues with UNIFIL. We thought UNIFIL, even though it is peacekeeping and not peace enforcing, UNIFIL used to turn a blind eye from Hezbollah activity in the area. Your regiment is considered to be one of the best, if not the best, out of all UNIFIL, and it is no coincidence that your regiment of yours is sitting just next to the border. Let's move to the second slide. Those are the 4 terror organizations that we were addressing in the last 2 years since the 7th of October 23, and basically the lessons that I'm going to draw in the second part of the presentation are leaning on our war, if you wish, against Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza, against Hezbollah in South Lebanon, and against the Houthis in Yemen. I'll save you this video, number one, because we don't have much time, and I promised Stephanie to be over by time. And second, no, don't operate it. It's too graphic. It shows that once Israel pulled back from the city of Gaza and Hamas came back, it shows you how they reestablished their authority by executing in broad daylight their own people who they suspected were helping Israel. We can do without it. So far is the background. Lessons. First lesson is that a state fighting against a non-state actor, or what I call, what do you do when your enemy do not wear an army uniform? This is where the complication starts. We, in 1948, in 1967, in 1973, we fought against Arab armies. By the way, in 1973, what is known as the October War, we were again taken by surprise. As big as the surprise we were taken on the 7th of October 23, we'll speak about it in a few minutes, but it is completely different game quote unquote, because war is not a game, but let's call it a game just for the sake of the argument. When one army is fighting another army, that the rules of, again, the game are very clear to everybody, or when a state is fighting a non-state actor, and the terrorist that is shooting against you in the market of Gaza If he managed to survive, he takes off his clothes and just go and hang around in the street as he is just one of the ordinary people, just as a civilian. So the rules of the game here are extremely complicated and different. This might be, Professor Vladimir, the most important lesson we learned from the war. Do not judge your enemy by his intentions, but by his abilities. When I was in the, as Stephanie said, in the military war academy, not as a soldier, by the way, in the Israeli war academy is hosting civilians, senior civilians from the government service, and I was lucky to be one of them. We always were told that you judge your enemy by the meeting point of his ability and the intention. Not anymore. Not anymore. We thought that the Hamas abilities are very limited. We knew about the intentions, but we thought that their abilities cannot address our abilities. That's not the case anymore. Ability is an ability and intention is intention. Nowadays, we judge our enemy by the intention. And if the enemy, it can be Hamas, PIJ, Hezbollah, or even Iran, if they say that they would like to eliminate the state of Israel, since the state of Israel is not a legitimate entity in the Middle East, we take them seriously. Whether they have the ability to do it, whether they do not have the ability to do it, we take them very seriously for what they say. Can deterrence work with terrorists? We divide our national defense strategy into 4 chapters. The first one is this one, the deterrence. Deterrence in popular language means to tell your enemy, don't mess around with me, because if you mess around with me, you'll pay a dear price. It's not good for you. If deterrence fails, as can fail with terrorists, then we have what you call the early warning system. This is where the intelligence, deterrence is projecting power, is projecting your force. But if deterrence fails, as happened on the 7th of October 23, then you have the early warning system. This is where the intelligence has to come to the chief of staff, to the prime minister, tell him, our deterrence is falling apart, the other side is aiming to do something. On the 7th of October, also our early warning system failed. As I told you, Professor Vladimir, before, one of the reasons it failed is because we were leaning too heavily on electronic intelligence. We completely deserted the value of what is known as human intelligence. It happened so that I think it will be fair to say that we knew much better what is happening in Iran, which is thousands of kilometers from Israel, and we didn't know what is happening in Gaza, which is only a few hundred meters from the Israeli towns next to Gaza. This was the price we paid for eliminating or ignoring the human element in intelligence known as human. Again, we learned a lesson. Then just let's go back for the previous slide for a second. Then after early warning, you have the element known as defense. Again, our defense failed on the 7th of October. And the 4th element of this strategy is what you call decisive military victory, where you try to bring the war into the land of the enemy. Again, we had a victory against Hamas. It was not decisive. That has to be said. I didn't show you the video, but Hamas is still there, on their feet. They were beaten, but they are still there. It was a victory, but it was not a decisive victory that brought them to show a white flag. And that's why, again, we're going to speak about it in a second. Currently, they are reluctant to go through disarmament. We'll speak about it in a second. Okay, let's move to next slide. We are being told soon that you cannot fight terrorists, Hezbollah or in Lebanon or Hamas or PIJ because they are leaning on a strong popular support. I think this argument is not strong because it's true that you cannot fight the strong popular support, all kind of Islam that we see often in the Middle East and also in Africa, but you should eliminate those organizations to have a military arm. If Hezbollah, let's take it as an example, would like to be a political party in Lebanon, or Hamas would like to be a political party, that's one thing. But weapons should be held by the state, not by parties, just like NPP doesn't have its own army, and NDC doesn't have its own army. It is Ghana that has an army, so does the Palestinian. Once they'll have a state, they will need to have their own army or police in their case. Terrorists should not have their own army, even if they lean on a popular support. Another challenge we were facing, what to do when terror is using human shields. Much was said about it. It's a very complicated human and philosophical question. When I say terrorist is using human shields, I don't mean only the 251 Israelis that have been hijacked to Gaza, but I also mean the 2 million Palestinians, innocent civil Palestinians. Both of them were held by the Hamas and the PIJ as human shields. Again, I'll give you another example to explain the complexity and of this, I would say, dilemma. Much before the war, we knew that Hamas activists are meeting, the leadership meeting in a house in Gaza. But we knew that next to this house, there is a bunch of civilians. And happens often when Hamas activists are finding shelter in a place next to civilians. Eventually, we decided to address the building, to attack the building, but to use a small bomb that will not make a significant damage. Eventually, all the activists escaped. No damage was done to the civil population, what we call, I don't think it's a good name, but that's the name which is used, collateral damage. So indeed, and again, this is something that happened before the war. No collateral damage happened, but no damage to the terrorists as well. So what do? I don't put an exclamation mark here, only a question mark, but this is just to show you that addressing this challenge, as the Americans and the Brits had their own challenge in Afghanistan and Iraq, we were not the only modern armies that had to face this challenge. There are no easy answers here. There are no easy answers here because often the collateral damage and the damage to try to bring down the terrorists, you have to choose between the two, and this choice is nearly impossible. This might be the main question, the main enigma, the main question mark we are facing now. Will terrorists in the Middle East, I'm mainly talking about Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon, will be willing to disarm themselves? The only successful process of a terror organization going into disarmament that I know was 20 years ago in Ireland when the IRA completed, Dr. Vladimir, I think he knows better than I, but basically they completed their disarming process. In the war lately between Ethiopia and the Tigrayan army in Ethiopia, I think 2 or 3 years ago. Also, there was a process in which the Tigrayans agreed to disarming. I'm not sure if this process was completed successfully. I am sure that currently the Hamas is refusing to disarm themselves. Since I read Arabic, I just saw, I think yesterday, one of their leaders, Hussam Badaran, said he spoke about the ISF, as I said before, the International Stabilization Force that is about to disarm the Hamas. And he said in Arabic, I will translate it, that any international force who is about, I can read it in Arabic so it will make a nice impression on you, but I will, he said any international force that will deploy in Gaza his only role should be monitoring the ceasefire and put a buffer between the Palestinian people and the force of the occupation, that is to say the IDF. And then he's asked about if the ISF, the International Stabilization Force, should not have a more significant role. And then he says this is something that cannot be implemented, and it will make the scene only more complicated. So he speaks in a diplomatic language. Again, in Arabic it sounds better, but what he means is we are willing for peace keeping, we are not willing for peace operation. What can the international community do to fight terror? And when I say international community, I'm speaking also about Ghana, which today is certainly one of the most important states in West Africa. I consider Ghana to be also one of the most important states in the AU. You had your seat at the Security Council a few years ago. And I think the international community basically has, and I'm going to finish in a few minutes, Stephanie, mainly 3 roles in an attempt to isolate terror. It's to bring down terror. Again, I'm sure Dr. Vladimir is going to speak about it more. Military campaign is not enough. Military campaign, as I depicted before, is important, but it's not enough. Money laundering, the terrorists are being paid. Again, we spoke about it earlier on, Dr. Vladimir. Somebody pays them. And international efforts to eliminate the money laundering is extremely important. Same goes for supply of weapons. And again, if you go back to the campaign against Hezbollah in South Lebanon, the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701 that basically tried to bring peace to Lebanon, and in which Ghana took such an important part. This is the resolutions that laid the ground for UNIFIL, hence the Ghanaian activity in South Lebanon. So the international community does have a very important role to play. Our main challenges in the campaign in the last 2 years, first one, as I said, the lack of strategic depth. It brings us back to the first slide I showed. As I said before, when you don't have a strategic depth, I didn't show you in the map, but from the West Bank to the sea, in the nearest point, it's only 10 miles. 10 miles. It takes a tank like a few minutes to cross it, and an airplane, it takes less than a minute. So Israel, if we pull back to the 1967 borders, I will not show the map again, we are left with 10 miles, 15 kilometers between the West Bank and the Mediterranean, a situation that no Israeli will be willing to take after all the challenges we were challenged. So this is the strategic depth. The need to address few fronts simultaneously. In the last war, we were actually addressing 7 fronts simultaneously. The one in Gaza, the one in Lebanon. We had challenges coming from Syria, from Iraq, from Iran. As you all know, we had a war with Iran in June, from Yemen, and from the West Bank. So at the same time, simultaneously, we addressed 7 fronts. And the last challenge is what I call limited oxygen. Our army is mainly leaning on reserve army. The regular army is a very small one. Every youngster in Israel between the age of 18 and 21 is doing his army service, but in a case of war, the regular army is there only to hold the other army until the reserve are coming to the front. Usually it takes them 24 hours. But the reserves are also the backbone of our economy. So you cannot hold the big army with the reserve soldiers for too long, because then the economy goes down. So this is what I call the limited oxygen. In all the war till now, short of the last campaign that has lasted 2 years, we have managed to finish the war in a very short time. 6 days in the 67 war, and then up to 50 days. It's the first time that the war lasted for 2 years. Because of all the complications I was speaking about earlier on, because of the human shields and everything. But this has a very serious price for the Israeli economy. Those, I think, our strengths while we fight terror. Determination is quite clear. Experience, unfortunately, I would say, unfortunately, we have a lot of experience fighting terror. And sophistication, again, we spoke about it earlier on with Dr. Vladimir. I'm mainly talking about the Israeli high-tech. But as we learned in this war, you can lean on our technological advantage only up to a certain point. We have, again, we eliminated all kind of traditional intelligence because we said we have a very sophisticated system which is deployed along the border, and this system will tell us exactly what the enemy is going to do, and this was a wrong assumption. Let me conclude by what I think is the main lesson, at least of me, of us. This is even before I heard my colleague speaking. Actually, we need to show this slide at the end of his presentation. Unless you're going to contradict it, I believe that terror is terror. To the best of my understanding, there is no difference between Hamas, PIJ, Hezbollah, you name it, and Boko Haram. I bring here Hamas and Boko Haram, both because also because the names are a little bit similar, but also because I believe that at the end of the day, again, terror is terror, and it makes no difference if this terror is active in the Middle East, or in the heart of Africa, or in Nigeria, or in the Sahel, and by this I'm going to conclude, if this assumption is true, if all non-state actors are acting the same way, so the assumption is that all state actors, whether it is Ghana, or Nigeria, or Israel, has to be on the same side of the front. I'd like to thank you very much. Thank you very much.
For that brilliant presentation, and thank you for the insights that you've shared as well. We would quickly take our second presentation for today. This presentation is going to focus on fighting terrorism in the Sahel region and Nigeria. To take us through this presentation is Dr. Vladimir Enchidanso. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Dr. Vladimir Enchidanso.
I'm most grateful for those kind words. I think I would like to stand on the existing protocol established by my very good friend, Kojo Ponkroma, and His Excellency. I mean, who am I to contradict them? So let's stand on that. And I'm very happy to see my very good friend also over here. And you need to organize most of these things and invite me, because some people I haven't seen for ages have all appeared here. My colleague at the Lagos Center for International Affairs, Dr. Ahosu. Welcome. Right. Terrorism. I just want to make some introductory remarks. His Excellency just want to repeat them. Terror is terror, whether it's in Africa or whatever it is. And of late, what is happening is that their strategies are the same. They are diffused. We thought we had defeated ISIS in the Middle East. They have now been diffused because that hierarchical order is no longer there. What is happening is that they don't have the hierarchy so that you are able to trace them easily. They are now diffused. You have ISWAP, ISIS in West Africa province. You have ISIS in Southern Africa. You have ISIS in Hordosan in Afghanistan. So ISIS is now diffused. Now they are looking for more intensity in lethality. That is, they want to kill as many people with the smallest of arms. So that is also their modus operandi, somehow how they are operating. Besides, it is becoming more religious. But the canvas for terrorism now is becoming more religious. The ideological nature of terrorism is dying. So if you see any terrorist, there is some more religious factor than an ideological factor. So whether it's in the Middle East or America or whatever it is, you can see this religious factor coming. But we were warned, we were seriously warned by Huntington that the nature of wars in the 21st century, after the Cold War, is going to be more religious, more in the form of clash of civilizations. We are running through what I call globalization. And globalization is moving us towards some oneness in thought, oneness in the way things should be. We should be governed by some rules and whatever it is. This sophistication is not going to be acceptable to some civilizations which are not right for it. And so we are going to see these clashes. And he warned clearly in 2000 that we are going to see more jihadism in the form of religious contests. So I mean, you hit it right, but this is the nature. Terror is terror everywhere. And again, fighting terrorism, it will come at my conclusion again. Fighting terrorism, you nailed it right there. To fight terrorism only with this kind of their old method, that is using the kinetic approach, force against force, we call it the kinetic approach, should be mixed with some non-kinetic approach in the form of trying to uproot their minds and planting in there a new mind. The kinetic approach has not worked anywhere, so I knew that Israel is powerful, but Israel will not win the jihadi war. Never. Because they will come back. And you have already said that, this Hezbollah and whatnot, they say they won't disarm. If you force and disarm them today, they will come back in another form, because in the brain is implanted the virus of lethality, the virus of violence. Having said all this, let me turn back to what I have. The threat of terrorism within the sub-region, that is the West African sub-region. Can we go to the next slide? Right. This is the area I'm going to talk about, the Sahel region of Africa. Next slide. Right. The instability we are seeing in the sub-region basically is because of unresolved historical differences, geopolitics on the world stage, and whatnot. And, this area is now the epicenter of terrorism in the world. The UN report on terrorism clearly states that about 56% of global terrorism is now centered in the Sahel. 56%. How did it become all that? And we'll see that from 2011, it has been the center because Gaddafi was no more. We tackled all our this on Gaddafi, and then those who were able to run away from Gaddafi settled in the Sahel. It's a wide expanse of land where it's difficult to track. So they all came back and settled there. Secondly, we said, hooray, we have defeated terrorism in the Middle East, ISIS. And the ISIS started diffusing. So Al-Qaeda, ISIS nexus found a way in our part of the region. So these are the reasons. And already terrorism thrives where there is some kind of insecurity, some kind of war already. They thrive. Those of you who hear me always on radio and television, I've been warning that Boku, we should be very careful. I've always been stressing. Jinim in Mali, when they were having problems with their own other locals, fighting among each other at the Boku, decided to invite Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, which were in the southern part of Algeria, to come and help them. When they came, they found they won the war and then found space to stay. So Jenin became strengthened. I've always warned. I don't have the facts. I don't have research on it, but I'm always saying that there is the possibility that either Kusasi or Mamprusi will invite somebody from Burkina, come and help us. Then we'll see heavy war over there one night, and then we'll think, oh, it's the usual Kusasi Mamprusi war. Then these terrorists get a place to stay. Because along the West African borderlines up north is one tribe which is now becoming an endangered species, and that is the Fulani. They cut across everywhere, and terrorism has been associated with them. I wouldn't be surprised if they have their kith and kin here and they want to come and help. I wouldn't be surprised if some Moshi people aligned to any jihadists, because we have Moshi in Ghana, we have Moshi in the Upper Volta, former Upper Volta, Burkina. So we need to be very careful when we have internecine feuds. We need to resolve them. The Arab-Israeli question that His Excellency talked about is the same thing, unresolved historical differences. In 1947, why did we not create the two states? So when it was not created, then part of the Arab world said, no, Israel has no right of existence. In fact, the PLO put it, Article 10 of their constitution, clearly stated that they wouldn't allow Israel to stay. And that started the whole thing. And since then, we have not been able to resolve it. In the same way, in the Sahel area, we have not been able to resolve most of these historical differences. Azawad, in Mali, never wanted to be part of a Mali under France. They have their own technical, religious and cultural issues. So when they were being given independence in 1960, they said, as for us, leave us. We didn't listen, and we have not solved that problem up till now. So every time the Tuaregs get up, 2-3 years later, they will get up. We suppress them, they will get up. They are part of the Jinim in Mali today, causing all the troubles that we are talking about. Next slide. Well, I think I mentioned this in oral. Can we go ahead? Good. As I said, if you look at this slide, you will see that the Sahel region as part of the world constitutes more than 50%. Look at the red. The level of the red. The level of the red shows the level of terrorism in the Sahel area. If you take this kind of matrix. Yes, let's move ahead. Right. Take the map, virtually half of the world now, and you see the arc of terror or the arc of instability is within the Sahel region. And then the dotted line, as you see over there, clearly shows the epicenter of terrorism in the world today. And from the Western Sahara all the way to Al-Shabaab in Somalia, you see the arc of terror. Let's go ahead. Good. Again, interestingly, let's come to Africa. The number of attacks we saw in 2016, from 2016 to 2024, if you take the whole of Africa, the West African sub-region contains 70% of all the terrorist attacks. And that's what you have over there, the Venn diagram that you have over there. Central Africa is just about only 12%. Southern Africa, just about 5% or so. But 70% of terrorist activities in Africa is in West Africa, 70%. This is not my research, this is the United Nations research. Let's move ahead. Right. And then the resultant encumbrances is the fact that refugees all over, if you see the red, it's like these are places encumbered by problems of instability because of the problem that we saw in the earlier slide. Carry on. Right. what causes all these? I've mentioned unresolved historical differences, but they come basically from bad governance. Look, ladies and gentlemen, there's a big difference between democracy and good governance. Don't make a mistake. Say Ghana is a democracy. Do we have good governance? So when I mention bad governance, I'm not talking about democracy. Don't make the mistake of equating democracy with good governance. Good governance is a bigger segment than democracy. Democracy, you check the list. Oh, do they have a constitution? Check. Do they go to polls every 4 years? Check. Do they have ministries, that is the civil service, public service? Check. You check all those things and say Ghana is a democracy. I love it. I love the Ghana that I'm in compared to others. But good governance, if it slips, brings terrorism. Because bad governance creates local champions who will oppose you. And if the opposition is not going well, they turn into terrorism. So good governance is always very important. Very, very. Do you have human security as part of good governance? Are people employed? Do they have access to jobs to satisfy their economic security? Do they have other human security like health, education, etc.? That is where good governance is. If these things are lacking, somebody will give it to them. Boko Haram came as a result of what? Bad governance. There were large expanse of ungoverned spaces. The Nigerian government is not there. The one who is telling the people how to mobilize themselves and live was Yusuf, who would go to the politicians anyway, collect money, buy a lot of things for Ramadan and that kind of thing. So he was the one who was the governor. You know, government has not sent him, but he was the one that people knew. So one day when he told them that, look, we are poor and we are like this because of Abuja and Lagos, and that all the education that people have put there, look at how they are using it to deceive you. I have two. He had 2 master's degrees. He had 2 master's degrees, and he put it in a bonfire and said, Boko is haram. Western education is evil. That's it. And he got people to follow them. In our part of the world where religion has become so important and a conduit for riches, you know, it's easy. Somebody is building an ark in Ghana, right? And we all believe that. Somebody would tell you that tomorrow something is going to, we all believe that. So in a place where religion is a conduit to human survival, Yusuf was easy for the people, and they followed him. Unfortunately, when they killed him, they demonstrated the body and showed how useless he was. As I was telling H.E., you can't use force to stop force. So they used force to stop Yusuf, but he became a hero. He became a big hero and got a better following, and that's how Boko Haram became better Boko Haram. Then you have ungoverned spaces I've mentioned. Failure of intervention strategies. I can refer those who are interested to an article I published quite recently in the International Journal for Multidisciplinary Research. International Journal for Multidisciplinary Research, the August issue. And I mentioned that very seriously because I had an argument with one of my old professors about how France has been chased from Africa. I said because of the intervention processes. His Excellency was mentioning whether there should be an intervention force or a peace mediation force. When you use force against force, you may defeat. But as I said, the brain is still working. They will come back. So the intervention strategies we have used in the Sahel have not worked. They were mostly kinetic, but the non-kinetic aspect was bringing something which was alien to the people. It was very alien. In Mali and other places, they respect their Mbadugu, even in our Ghana. I went with a friend of mine to the north, we were in the university together. And when we went and we were going to greet the chief, he was almost prostrate on the ground and asked me to do the same. We don't do that in my area. But I had to do it. That is what is in their brain, their system, their culture. People respect their Mbadugu, and then you bring French, democracy. where you can insult the president freely. We in Ghana, there was a time I was on radio and people were insulting the president. I said, my God. I remember our boss, Kofi Kumadu, who was telling us that, look, this is illegal. It was illegal to just insult the president. But in Ghana today, we are doing it. People just insult the president. That's your democracy. But the Navropio will not accept insult. And the people will not accept it. So when you are doing your interventions and you are bringing in some strategies about social cohesion, don't bring any alien form of things. Something they are not French people. They are not Germans. They are not Europeans. Use from what they know to what they don't know for them to accept what they don't know. But we're not doing that. We're saying we are changing the Sahel. So I've mentioned all historical differences. The clash of civilizations, this is real. This is real, and it is happening everywhere in the world. We must be very careful. Lack of human security, I've mentioned it. The ready and availability of small arms and light weapons on the West African continent, West African subcontinent. In Ghana alone, my friend Professor Kwesi has come out with a research and said not less than 2 million, I think our guest speaker mentioned it, not less than 2 million unregistered arms are just hovering around Ghana, small Ghana, 2 million. And that's dangerous. So you can imagine how much is there for the West African sub-region. And they are so cheap. They are so cheap. AK-47, which sells at about $350 per at least, the cheapest you can get, you are buying them in bulk as a government, are sold in some places for $15. $15. Turn it into your 12 CDs, and you get that, and you know. So all these things, and then inertia in regional integration and cooperation. You see how ECOWAS is hiccuping already. So putting together the synergies in order to make sure that we are level in our democratic dispensations is not happening. Next slide. This is the geography of armed conflicts in Africa. And you can see that the West African sub-region, the Sahel area, is awash with a lot of armed conflicts. And this is what terrorism likes a lot. Yes. Next. My own analysis, I said, there are drivers of violent extremism that disaggregate levels of analysis. We have the push factors and then the pull factors. And at times we make a mistake of thinking that the pull factors, those things that actually make people vulnerable, like poverty, education. And I always, when I'm teaching terrorism, I tell them that poverty doesn't bring terrorism. Education does not in itself bring terrorism. Anger. My friend knows that when my students use frustration aggression theory, I get angry because I'm frustrated. I'm angry, but I don't go to attack government. So it's a psychological thing they are trying to put in our field. The point is that education, poverty, they are catalysts which the terrorists would easily use. Other than that, Emmanuel, if you remember the story of Emmanuel, that Canadian boy who came all the way to come and fight for ISIS in 2013. His father was a rich man. He's the only son of the family, only son. And they were occupying, I've forgotten the acreage, a chateau that they had in Belgium and other places that the father had. All these things for the boy. So why would the boy leave this luxury and come and fight for ISIS in the conditions of ISIS? So it's not education, it's not poverty. It was only a catalyst. If you're uneducated, it's easier to use you. Educated person like me, even they can use me because I'm poor. You see, I'm always waiting when I'll be recruited, but I've not been recruited. So the pull and push factors are there for radicalization. The structural conditions that increase the risk of violent extremism are particularly prevalent in the Sahel. Those things I'm mentioning. These include underlying economic conditions, poverty, underdevelopment, unemployment, corruption, impunity. I think Kojo Opon Nkrumah mentioned the corruption. Poor governance, I've mentioned it. And the Arab Spring, Mark, you have said that for our region, the Arab Spring and its offshoots, the end of Gaddafi, created a very good condition for the congregation of jihadists in the West African sub-region. Next. So the Northern Mali conflict, for example, You know, if you see the legend, Ansardine, the Red Spots, the Mujao, Akim, and others. Next slide. But in some few years, by 2025, look at what Mali looks like. Next slide. I've mentioned the ungoverned spaces, and for me, that's very, very, very important. If you leave any part of your country ungoverned, that is, they are on their own and they have a hero amongst them, that hero becomes your enemy as a government. That hero is the one they know, and then he'll be fighting you, the government, because he's a hero over there. And whatever he tells them, or he or she tells them, is what they take. It's an ungoverned space, so he is the supplier of all the wisdom. I told you about Yusuf. Yusuf would go to the governors, you know, go all the way from Maiduguri to the southern part, to Abuja, and even to Lagos, to bring truckloads of oil, of all the goodies that the people need, which they don't see. And he is the Yusuf who is distributing. So he is the one they know. He's been building mosques for them. For them, mosque means you're going to heaven. And after doing all this, he becomes a local hero against government excesses, call it. So the government bring policemen there, and the policemen are enemies of the people. Soldiers, they are enemies of the people. So ungoverned spaces, please, those of you who are politicians, listen to us very carefully. Do not leave any place ungoverned. Let government presence be felt at least over there. Get them the roads, get them the schools, get them the hospitals. If you leave it for Inchidansu to go there and give them these things, I'm the hero. If I see you fighting me, I get an army, and you call me a terrorist. You created a terrorist. So ungoverned spaces, for heaven's sake, let us not leave it. Yes, next step. So these are the active organizations in the Sahel region. So we have Jinim, we have Ansardine, Masina Liberation Front, the Katiba Sema, Akim in the Sahara. Carry on, next. So you have all the slides I've said. Anytime I have a presentation like this, it's like a teaching slide. So anybody can have it if you want it. Next slide. And then beyond all these problems of jihadism in the West African sub-region, we have been visited by what I call the coup epidemic. And so in the midst of all these, we have this coup epidemic. In 2021, there were 6 coup attempts in Africa. 4 of them were very successful. Let's carry on. And you know, coups and terrorism go together. Coup is another form of terrorist kind, because it's a sudden jolt in the politics of any country. Right. Of course, there were a regular occurrence at independence. I have divided coups into 3 different types. 3. The first type of coup we had on the African continent, especially in the West African sub-region, is what I call the conspiratorial coups. Platoon mates just conspire, hey, let's also go and chop small. They were usually supported by the Cold War patrons. Those coups were led by low officers, at times NCOs, and they were bloody and lengthy. They were bloody, they killed. The next type of coup is what I call the systemic coups. Systemic coups that save the system from implosion. And those are the ones we are having of late. Those coups are made normally by very high-ranking officials, generals, colonels, and above, and they are popular. At times, no gun is fired. If you watch Mali, Guinea, Niger, Burkina, no guns were fired. It was just the man gets up to announce that I've taken over, and there's a popular support. That one is saving the system from implosion. And I say saving because the only organization capable of bringing about a modicum of peace is the military. So if the general gets up, he's saving the system. If you take Niger, for example, the man just, Mr. President, please sign that you have resigned. If you don't, I shoot you. And that was it. You know. And in Central Africa, no, Gabon, the same thing. They just lock the man in a room and announce that he has been overthrown. No problem. And the population just, That's a systemic coup. A coup to save the system from further implosion. I have a third category. That is the constitutional coup. When heads of state change the constitution, it's happening mostly in the French-speaking countries. They change the constitution and they can go a second term, third term, fourth term. Ouattara is a typical example. And Cameroon. But you see, the first and the last I've mentioned are very dangerous and can create problems, especially in places where there is instability already through jihadism. So these are the three types of coups I see within the continent, and we must be very careful about each one of them. I know people are saying Ghana, oh, we have a democracy, and people have been calling me, why is there a coup in Guinea-Bissau? And that's sort of, check the canvas, check the history of the country. And if democracy doesn't stay well, and bad governance sets in, then any of these three coups I've mentioned can happen. That's right. Let's go ahead. There's also the governance deficits and terrorism. I said terrorism has found a place in West Africa. Next slide. So these are the coups over the years from 50s, as I mentioned. In the 50s and the 60s, you see that the coups became plenty, the successful ones and the non-successful ones. 60s, just because of the Cold War. Now they died down a little after the 90s, just because of the third wave of democracy that ruled the whole world. From the 90s, everybody was yearning for at least a Western type of democracy. You remember in our own country, we forced Jerry Rawlings to turn democratic or give us and see that's what is happening all along. See, we have been doing well on the coup, this thing, in Africa. Next slide. Yes, so these are the coups, successful and failed. Ghana, we've done well. We have had 10 coups already. I don't think we need any more. The only one that should come should announce me as the president. Yes, so you see, when it happens this way, the salute is there. You see, Ghanaians were rooting for this man when he came here with his side arm, and then the airways was awash. Professor, why should we allow him? I said, why are you not asking the soldiers or the security? You know, we shouldn't have been worried at all. I told them. The point is that our security and their security may have talked, and the allowance was given. Maybe there was nothing even in the firearm. Maybe, yes, because I know this because what we call that IGP from the north, Peter Namfuri, is a very close friend. When Gaddafi was coming here, he had 30 well-trained women. You saw the women. And they were all armed to the teeth. So a day before they came, we met Namfuri. Namfuri said, Doc, this is your people. I'm going to disarm them. I said, hey, can you? He said, I'm going to disarm them. And true to it, he made it clear to them. At the airport, he was there. You hand over all your arms when you are going, you're taking them, or else you don't enter. And he did it. All the ladies were disarmed completely, said, your security should be in my exactly. So this one, I told the journalists that we shouldn't be worried. He's not going to kill our head of state. Secondly, our security must have had some negotiations to allow him to, because it is part of his dressing, you know, so it may be there without this thing. Right. So these are countries which are in trouble. You see the orange color. They are all being led by the junta. And all these countries also have terrorist activities going on. That's why I merged the two, terrorism and the coups. Next slide. Yeah, these are countries in Africa being led by juntas or where there are troubles everywhere. Next slide. These are just for your consumption. Sub-regional share of military coups in Africa from 1960 to 2010. This is also a very important kind of data that may interest you. Right. ECOWAS has always stepped in and used measures that at times are unthinkable. They don't solve anything. Let us learn from areas or from ourselves and know that one failure helps us to do a better thing. In Niger, we warned that within 1 week, we were sending troops. When I was on air to say that it is impossible, I got a flak. my own very good political friends insulted me to the hilt. But to be honest, the CDS then was our former commandant. I said, Senior man, Mama, are we going? Said the way the politicians are saying so. He was very, very diplomatic. We couldn't just go. My research, or where my field is such that mobilizing an international force takes not less than 6 months. So to announce that you are going, please take it up, MP. Anytime people are debating that we should go to war, not as a country, but a multinational force, it takes minimum 6 months to mobilize logistics, the command, and even getting a commanding officer. It's not easy, it's debatable. 6 months. The minimum the UN has been able to mobilize is the 6 months I'm talking about. Mostly it is 9 months. So to give Niger 1 week, and we couldn't go, was a dent in the destiny of the ECOWAS. And again, since then, they lost credibility. See, a small country like Guinea-Bissau is saying, go away, ECOWAS. You know, I mean. So our interventions must be very positive. Next one. Right. Usually, the canvas for terrorism has something to do with security of a nation, economic development, and especially identity. Who are the terrorists identifying with? They identify themselves either with their own religion or something, there's a certain background, a certain hate, a certain blockade. Hamas is feeling that they have been mistreated, and it's a feeling they reverberate. It's like every generation is going to have it. So they have that one identity, and that their security lies in that identity, one way or the other. And then it's the canvas for the economic development. So we need to watch that. But the base of it is integration. If you are able to integrate, Europe can never have terrorism in one country established. Never. Because the security is in NATO. Unfortunately, West Africa, we don't have it. We do not have that canvas to rely on. So Boko Haram's territorial control, if you watch out, when they started, that's the only place they controlled. Next slide. But then, today, look at the red, and the yellow is where they could enter. But the red is their territory. It's a state within a state. Where they have is bigger than Ghana. And if Ghana is 20 times Israel, then it's about 100 times Israel. Let's go. We are ending. I brought this thing to warn you about the nature of terrorism. Watch the left, Boko Haram. They undertook, that year, 2016, they undertook 453 attacks. They killed 6,644. And that was 77% of innocent people, that is, not soldiers. The people who died, the deaths were only private citizens. Let's compare them with ISIS or ISIL. ISIL undertook more than 3 times or close to 3 times what Boko Haram did in Africa, 1,071. They killed less than Boko Haram did. And again, the people who they killed, they are only 44%. It shows how terrorism in Africa is more lethal. And we should be very careful. It shows how lethal it is. Let's go ahead. Right. ONEP warning. The ONEP is warning us that terrorism is moving downwards and we should be very careful. Move ahead. Right. Let's take Burkina. This is what the terrorists occupied, the red, in 2018. The same 2018, they were moving their territory. By 2019, this is what they have. I'll show you another slide where 2025, where they are, is scary. Let's move quickly. There you are. So you see all this territory, including part of Mali and that sort of thing. So we hear of Traore doing very well. Maybe only in the blue areas. All these places are no-go areas in 2025 now, 2024, sorry. Right, let's go.
So in the blue color?
Yeah, blue color. The red color is occupied by terrorists.
And the blue is the state.
The state, yes. Next. And you remember our former president was very much worried and said, let us address this dangerous trend collectively and decisively before it devastates the entire region. It's true, it can devastate the entire region. They haven't hired me. Other than that, I would have taken over. Next slide. And the effects are, part of the effects is the coups that we have seen. Part of the coup is also that it has stalled interventions. All the areas have driven away, other in the MINUSMA, that's the United Nations, that has been driven away. The French and European contingents have been driven away. And when such a thing stalled, it means it's a big problem. The collective efforts are no longer feasible. The cohesion of ECOWAS has also been tainted. And the AES, after all, has now been formed. All because terrorism was thriving. The threat of a domino effect is speculated throughout West Africa. A domino effect, I think you know the domino effect. Let's carry on. Again, this slide is showing the effects that I'm talking about, the Sahel conflict and its contingent effect, constituent effect. It's the same thing, turned in another slide, insecurity, that's right. My concluding remarks. Let us note that since the early 2000s, a combination of rebel groups, transnational organizations have afflicted, like Al-Qaeda and Islamic State have actually afflicted the whole region. They call themselves self-defense militias. In this region, governments are increasingly confronted with new forms of political violence. There is a need for understanding the canvas upon which the mosaic of terrorism in the Sahel is drawn before looking for strategies for addressing them. If we don't understand the canvas and we say we are going to draw this thing on them, we are making a mistake. Next. I think the way forward is the need to create better links between early warning systems, right? And the problem here over here is the response capabilities of ECOWAS, for example. Do we have it? Intensify intelligence gathering and sharing. One of the things we do is that we put intelligence in silos. Even in Ghana, the other time I was talking to the National Security Coordinator and I said, our intelligence community, how do you coordinate? Is there any coordinating center? If there is not, we put them in silos. 9/11 happened because the 16 organizations in the US, if you read the 9/11 report, were not coordinating. They all had something about that thing, but nobody came out to coordinate, and then it happened. So coordination. And then we need to rethink responses to the coups by employing more diplomatic efforts and political assistance while monitoring deterrent measures. Reconceptualize democracy and democratic practice. Let it be known, and I mean it, that democracy is not an event. It's the process. So whilst you've taken it, they say, oh, Ghana, we have elections every 4 years. It's an event. We tick. We have a president who will go every 4 years. We tick. It's not an event. It's a process. You keep on changing. You keep on crystallizing your democracy. And let us remember that the ballot cannot and does not stop the bullet. The ballot, get onto your ballot. Guinea-Bissau, they had finished elections. That's the ballot. It didn't stop the bullet. Intensify the assurance of human security in all countries. Intensify efforts at full integration. If we are integrated, these things will not happen because we'll have a standby force for the integration. And I think I would like to thank you for listening. That's right.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vladimir Nchidan. So before we move on to the next segment, I would like to take some time to acknowledge some of our guests here. So first and foremost, I would like to acknowledge His Excellency Julian Kabori, who is the Apostolic Nuncio. I would also like to acknowledge... He was born in Burkina Faso. Oh, okay, so we'll take a few comments from you during the session. We would also like to acknowledge Mr. Aviel Avraham, who is the Deputy Chief of Mission at the Israeli Embassy. We'd also like to acknowledge Honorable Alexander Akwesi Akwa, who is the Member of Parliament for Akimoda. And also we have Dr. Ken Ahosu, who is a Senior Lecturer at the Legon Center for International Affairs and Diplomacy. And then Mr. Douglas Idrisu from the National Security. It's a pleasure to have you all here, and thank you for honoring our invitation.